This conference will now be recorded.
So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wilmarie Newton, and I will be moderating this call. I ask that you please mute yourself in order to avoid background noise while the presenters are speaking. However, you can unmute yourself if you would like to ask a question, or you can always type them into the chat box. If you are calling from your cell phone, please physically mute your cell phone, as I am unable to mute you from my computer, or better yet, I cannot unmute you from my computer once I mute all. Let's see. Today we have the opportunity to get an update from Commissioner Cardona as well as other members from the department. Now, this meeting is being recorded and will be archived on CABE's website. So those of you that, or for those that weren't unable to join the meeting today, if you could let them know that they can access this meeting on our website. Now I'd like to turn it over to the Commissioner.
Well, before the Commissioner speaks, first of all, I'd like to introduce him, but also we apologize. We did not realize we'd have so many people. We tried this morning to go to meeting to allow us another 150 people, but that did not work out. So whoever is not on, if you talk to somebody who is not on this call and wanted to be, please let them know that we did try. It's just a one of those things that happens. So I want to thank all of you who are on, both board members and superintendents. I heard before this meeting the timing of which seemed to be coming right on top of a meeting with superintendents with the commissioner, and that might have confused people. Please know that we invite superintendents to this type of all board member meetings so that school board members and superintendents are getting the same information at the same time. So thank you for being on the CABE, and I want to especially thank Fran and CAPS for the work they are doing. They have been essential to helping all of us keep our stress under control and do the right thing for our children under these very, very trying circumstances. So I want to thank all the superintendents, all the board members, and with that, I'd like to turn this over to Commissioner Cardona and his team. They have been absolutely terrific in keeping us all together, forming a real partnership and doing all they can for the children as well. So with that, Commissioner?
Bob, before we get started with the Commissioner, I'm getting messages that some people can't hear. Are others able to hear? Yes? Okay,
Yes.
so those that can't hear, you might have to check your, oh, okay. It looks like others can hear, so it might be on your end. So you'll need to check your audio. Okay, Commissioner, I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to CABE for the invitation, and for the superintendents on the line also for adjusting your schedules to be available, as many as possible, to be on this call. Unfortunately, due to my change in schedule today, I was unable to participate in a call later this afternoon scheduled with superintendents. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to both groups, but more importantly, I appreciate the work that has been going on throughout the state of Connecticut for the 530,000 students that we have in our care. I just got off the phone maybe 10, 15 minutes ago with the unified conference call from the governor's office and the team of commissioners. And, I get a daily update on the work that's happening throughout our great state to serve not only students, but also all the residents of Connecticut. I'm really proud to be a small part of a team that's doing amazing work for our kids. We collectively have served over 1 million meals in Connecticut. That means that food insecurity is something that we have not slowed down our efforts. We have an anticipation of close to 200,000 sets of academic materials for students to make sure that we're still trying to provide equity and access in a time where many of our students are relying on whatever we can provide. And many of our students don't have access to internet. We, through the donations, we've been able to get 60,000 laptops for students in need so they can access the learning. Could you please mute your phone if you're not speaking? Thank you. So the efforts to support students are different, but they're more important than ever, and they're in full force. I want to thank all the educators, all the leaders, all the decision makers for the decisions that you're making in real time to support your learners. This last month has brought out the best in our education community, and I look forward to it continuing. As Bob mentioned at the onset of our call, we are partners in this process. We are all working on one team, and it's important that we continue to serve as one educational community. So calls like this are important, and the communication that we provide and that what we hear from you is equally as important, because the information we hear from you shapes the decisions that we make, but also influences the conversations we have with the Office of the Governor himself, and the Office of Policy Management. Members of my team are on the call, and we are prepared to answer questions. We hope the majority of the time that we're on is to answer questions. Our team is going to be available from 12 to 1 p.m. The order of how we're going to have take these questions will be dependent on accessing the questions either through the chat box version or unmuting of the phones. We'll do our very best to work with you as you try to manage. I think there are over 400 people on the call, and we'll take those questions. But before we get into the question and answer, I do want to have some members of my team provide quick updates. It might answer questions, but it might also give you some information that you don't have regarding what the efforts we're doing. So joining us, and we'll be providing updates after I'm done talking, is Deputy Commissioner Charlene Russell Tucker, our Legal Director, Jessa Myrtle, our Chief Financial Officer, Kathy Dempsey, and we also have our Director of Special Education, Brian Klimkowitz, and Special Advisor to the Commissioner, Chris Clouet, available for grading questions or any questions on the work that we've done to provide guidance to districts. Again, most important thing you're going to hear is we're working with you to make sure that we're providing the support that our students need, not only academically, but socially and emotionally. We know that this next month is going to bring loss to students, to our school communities, and we want to be prepared to support you in the difficult work you have to do day in and day out. I want to thank you in advance for your collaboration and your continued partnership. So with that, I'll pause and I'll turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Charlene Russell Tucker. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, and great to see everyone on the call. And I know some of you are also online. I hope you are well and hope you're taking care of yourself. I know Bob talked about keeping stress under control, so we know how important that is right now as we're going forward, not only for ourselves, but we've got to be our best selves so we can be helpful to others. In that vein, as the Commissioner mentioned, we've been curating social emotional learning resources and making that available. We have on our website a posted webinar for families on social emotional learning with a list of resources, but that was just the beginning. So just so you know that we are indeed working in real time to provide additional supports, either webinar, voices from the field. So some of you may be hearing from us with some best practices to incorporate on crisis management in dealing with loss, how to work with students and families, are all a part of the effort, looking at supports for educators generally on self-care, support for our leaders, our principals, our board members, you on this call, and next level support for families. We also have sobering data around disproportionality in the numbers of people who are impacted by the virus. And so the issue of equity is one that is not off to the side until we get beyond the pandemic, but it's something that we are indeed making sure that we use an equity lens in all the supports and work that we're doing. So we're also working on that as well with our partners, and that we're not doing this alone. That some of you, Bob, I know we've got your contact information and other superintendents and school leaders as well to be a part of the voices, including our students, to be voices in webinars and other support materials that we're putting together. So Please stay tuned. You are certainly part of this with us as we're working on social emotional learning, mental health, trauma supports that we're providing. And finally, the commissioner also talked about meals that are being provided. And thank you to board members who supported their districts in providing meals. We're now serving meals. The commissioner mentioned over 1 million meals served in over 415 sites across the state. And I'm pleased to say that some of our school sites are now including suppers in addition to breakfast and lunches that they're providing. So those are the updates. And I'll turn it over to Attorney Myrtle.
Thank you. I know Attorney Myrtle is going to be speaking in a second. I wanted to jump in because I know many of you are wondering about what the announcement is going to be today, and many of you have to plan in advance for class cancellations. And while the decision on class cancellation is ultimately the governor's, and the consultation to the governor happens with the Department of Public Health and the Department of Education, ultimately it's the governor's call. And as you might imagine, this can change based on new information or changes, or and it literally is almost up to the minute. The governor will be making the announcement today at 4. I'll be prepared to be on that call with the governor from home, but we anticipate an announcement that classes will be canceled for another month. Specific information will be shared at 4 p.m. I know many of you are asking about that. I'm going to ask you to hold the information for the specifics for 4 p.m. today, please. I wanted to give you the heads up because I know how important that is for this group, but we anticipate there being an announcement of another month of school cancellation. That's all I can share at this point. I will be on the phone with the governor's office after this call to go over details and talking points for our 4 p.m. press conference. But I wanted you to be aware of it, and I shared with the governor that the governor's office that I will be sharing preliminary information with you. At this point, I'm going to ask you again, hold this information until the 4 p.m. press conference in the event that there has to be a change. And I appreciate your flexibility and your patience on this because I know many of you have to make decisions, and that information is important. Thank you. Attorney Myrtle.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, for those of you who I don't know, I'm Attorney Myrtle. I'm the legal director for the Connecticut State Department of Education. And I just want to echo everyone's thanks for the collaborative approach that we've experienced here in the educational community as we deal with this unprecedented pandemic. So as you all know, I'm sure, after the March 10th declaration of state of emergencies, which it's hard to believe that that was just a month ago, the governor has issued a series of executive orders. And while we don't have time to cover them all, I did want to encourage you to consider consulting the SDE website for a webinar that I providing more in-depth coverage of the executive orders as they impact boards, as well as there was a webinar performed by the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities that has some overview of the executive orders, and I presume that you're receiving content information on that from CAVE and other entities as well. So to just quickly go over some of the ones I want to bring to your attention, as I'm sure you know, the Executive Order 7B modified some of the public meeting requirements to allow additional flexibility around Board of Education meetings, so long as those public agencies comply with certain conditions. And you will be happy to address questions around that if they arise. As the commissioner just noted, it was Executive Order 7C that initially canceled classes, and we are now looking at potentially longer class cancellations. One of the big questions we've had, and I just think it's important to note today, is about what that order means for the use of school buildings. And I just think it's important to emphasize that the executive order cancels classes, but does not actually close the school buildings. As you know, the school buildings are being used for things such as providing food service, as well as distributing distance learning or continued educational opportunity materials. Now, again, public safety and health is the primary concern, so we would just encourage you, if you have questions about use of school buildings, to work with your local public health departments to ascertain what's an appropriate way to access buildings while still maintaining social distancing. Executive Order 7E clarified the waiver of the 180-day school year, and we've provided some additional guidance around that, which I hope is helpful, which it has also been that it's important to consider scheduling and other factors that affect scheduling, like collective bargaining agreements, and whether you have your April break has been left to a local determination. Executive Order 7I was one that was something we received a lot of feedback on, and it implicated the privacy requirements, contracting requirements for students, and we've already issued further guidance on the availability to contract with vendors while also protecting the safeguarding our students' privacy issues. I think the one that I want to just focus on for a moment, and then I'll turn it over to our CFO, Kathy Dempsey, is that we've had a lot of questions, and there were many voices considered in one of the recent executive orders, 7R. 7R was the executive order that provided some guidance around continued pay for employees and continued contract requirements. And the good news is that that executive order starts by confirming that the state is going to continue to provide funding expected in your budgets for this fiscal year, which is also a message that is in the CARES Act, the federal law as well. And the primary spirit of 7R was that we want to ensure that these school communities remain supported. But we know that a one-size-fits-all approach is unlikely to address the unique needs of your specific board, your specific municipality, and the students that attend your schools. So local control is important, and so that continues to provide local control. But we also want to emphasize that, again, the spirit was to provide stability for staff, particularly those who may rely on a regular paycheck and health insurance to keep their households running. Safeguard taxpayer money, but ensure that there is continuity of service so that when we are able to return to school and to return to classes, that we will have those services that we need. Another specific question that I just think it would be helpful to address is related to the special education providers, where the contracts with special education providers is also mentioned in this executive order. We provided guidance around that, and specific to particularly approved special education programs, we've strongly encouraged school districts to continue their current contracts because we're expecting those programs to continue to work on providing the necessary services in students' IEPs, and also to participate to the greatest extent possible in providing these continued educational opportunities for our students. So I just want to emphasize again that we will defer to your board council to provide you feedback on the federal law, but the federal law does indicate that to the greatest extent possible, boards and schools will continue to pay employees and contractors during the period of disruptions related to the coronavirus. And the spirit of the executive order, provides a similar message. And I think I'm going to turn it over to our CFO, Kathy. Again, I would encourage you to reach out to us if you have questions, and to consider those webinar resources that we've already provided, as there have been a number of executive orders, and I don't want to go into too much specifics today. So thank you again to this community, and I'll turn it over to you, Kathy.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kathy Dempsey. I'm the CFO at the Department of Education. I appreciate the opportunity to give you a brief update on what's going on currently. As Jessa mentioned, one of the things that the department is continuing to do is pay all of the major grants to local school districts in order to allow you to continue operations during this time. So, whether that's ECS funding, special education funding, your district can anticipate that those funds are still being provided. In regards to the Federal CARES Act, one of the things that it does offer is an opportunity for flexibility and waivers around the current title programs. And so we are excited that our waiver request is going into the USDOE this afternoon. And the USDOE is committed to like a 24-hour turnaround. So by tomorrow afternoon, I may be very fortunate to get that news. But that will assist your districts in having flexibility in terms of the timelines for expending your federal title funds. It also provides some flexibility for districts receiving Title 4A to modify their plans for how they will expend those funds, which in the case of districts needing to still procure distance learning software, technology, those funds are going to be eligible for those purposes. So that's a good thing. And under the Federal CARES Act, we are anticipating, and this is an estimate at the moment because we haven't actually gotten the award confirmation from USDE, but that under the Education Stabilization Fund, Connecticut will receive about $111 million. And then there is a Governor's Emergency Relief Fund, and that fund is designed to assist school districts with the greatest needs related to COVID virus and institutes of higher education that have been impacted by this. So I don't have a breakout as to how much will go to either K-12 or higher ed, but that is another $28 million that is coming into the state, again, to assist our school districts with meeting their expenditure needs locally. Next week, my staff is working along with the federal program managers on some early guidance around the Federal CARES Act. So we're hoping to have that out to you next week. And then we will provide regular communication as we get that information from the federal government moving forward. And thank you again, and have a good afternoon.
I want to thank members of my team for being available to communicate updates. I also want to share with you, I'm getting information as I speak, that the governor is holding the press conference at 4 p.m. today. Again, it's anticipated that an announcement will be made about class cancellations. So let's wait for that to be made official before making it public. And there's a municipal call that was changed again till 5 p.m. So the municipal call with the governor, if you participate in that, it's going to be taking place at 5 p.m. I wanted to make sure since we have an audience of almost 450 people, we clarify that. The press conference today at 4 p.m. and the municipal call today is at 5 p.m. Thank you. At this point, Bob, that concludes the updates from the State Department of Education, and we'll turn the meeting back over to you for either questions or any other information you want to share. Thank you.
I know that Patrice wanted to make a comment. Patrice, can you unmute, please?
Thank you very much, Commissioner, and all your staff. We want, on behalf of all of the CABE staff and our members, to express our great appreciation to you and your absolutely outstanding staff. I can't tell you how important it is that we have such great access, and particular thanks over the past 2 weeks to Jessica and to Kathy, because legal and fiscal issues have obviously been, well, somewhat in the background compared to making sure students are learning, are so important to the ability of districts to make good decisions. So thank you.
Great. Let's go to questions. I see on the chat box, we have a grading question from Superintendent Brummett from Newington. We received the guidance yesterday regarding the use of pass-fail. I want to confirm, that just moved for me. I want to confirm it will be used statewide. Parents are very concerned that some districts will still use letter grades and it will be unfair to their students.
Sure, thank you. And I'm going to turn it over very quickly to Dr. Clouet, who, along with Keith Norton from our agency and others have worked really hard over the last 2 weeks to gather information on grading guidance. But I want to be very clear. We want to, as an agency, provide support and guidance where needed. Anything that we feel needs to be required or mandated will go through an executive order. We still respect the fact that there has to be local control, and we are going to be communicating guidance. In some cases, it's very strong guidance. In other cases, it's here are some options. Anything that we feel that requires a change in either policy or legislation will go through an executive order. But I appreciate Maureen's question and concern, and we do have recommendations on that. And for more specific information on how we got there and how it includes our colleges, I think that's important to point out. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Clouet now.
I don't see Chris on the list of people. Chris, are you there?
Can you hear me? I'm on the.
So unfortunately, because he's on the cell phone, we're not going to be able to interact with him. Otherwise, that's what's going to happen.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to try to see if we could get him on the line somehow. It's important that he share the background of that. But to answer the question, the grading, we provided guidance on that one. That wasn't a required one selection. We have heard from some districts who have felt that their efforts to continue distance learning has happened without missing a beat. And fortunately for those districts, they were able to provide access right away. I still caution the use of grades only because, number one, colleges have already accepted the fact that they're going to receive pass-fails in many cases. And so a lot of changes are being made. And keep in mind that many of your learners now, while while grading might sound like a good option now, I hate to think this way, but many of our students moving forward are going to experience loss in either their family or in our school community that can impact them a month from now differently than they are affected now. We strongly recommend some form of pass-fail or pass-incomplete option. We want districts to take into account the equity piece in terms of many of our learners right now are primary caregivers. Many of our learners right now are dealing with the fact that their parents are frontliners. They're working every single day and they're being potentially exposed, and that impacts their ability to be successful. So we strongly encourage some form of pass-fail or pass-incomplete option. One option that we gave that others may consider is a pass with distinction. There are many learners, as I said earlier, that are going above and beyond, and districts want to find a way to communicate with them that they've gone above and beyond. So we're providing guidance at this point, but this is not one of those topics that we feel we're going to mandate throughout the whole state of Connecticut. So I'll pause there to allow for other questions.
I know Don Harris had a question. Don is president of CABE on the state board and also chair of the Bloomfield Board of Education. Don?
And if you could unmute yourself. Oh. We still can't hear you, Don. And you are unmuted.
Well, we'll get to Don as soon as we can. Let's go on. I see we're getting some more questions. Will further guidance be coming on PPTs I know Brian is on the call. You want to take it, Brian?
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate the question. Yes, the short answer to that question is yes. You know, we know districts are doing what they can with regard to PPT meetings. In our guidance, you will note that the requirements to meet have not been alleviated at this point from OSIP. I do have a call this afternoon with OSIP, so I'm hoping to get further information. And I've heard that they have a series of topic briefs that are coming out. So we do plan to update that information as we get it. Just a couple of important notes on PPT meetings. We're asking districts, you know, to use a practical approach and consider obviously safety number one, confidentiality and privacy, meaningful participation of members of the PPT process. And we've heard, you know, sort of both ends of the spectrum as far as parents' ability to, not having the ability to attend meetings right now because of the situations in their homes, and the opposite end of the spectrum where parents really would like to connect to hold planning and placement team meetings. We have a document right now that we're getting input from a variety of stakeholders on some of the more detailed questions related to PPTs, and we're going to use that to inform our future guidance. I'm happy to answer any specific questions around the PPT process as a follow-up if needed.
Any further questions for Brian at this point? Chris, sorry, Commissioner Cardona, I'm informed that there is some room now. If Chris Clouet wants to call in or get in on the computer, we've got a little room now.
Thank you. I got two phones going, so I'll text them on one of them.
Thank you so much. I know there's another question or a comment. I struggle with the concept of providing grades, given the equity issued for students in pre-K to 8. Is it acceptable not to provide grades for those students and to just continue to provide meaningful feedback?
I think the answer is, you know, we want to maintain that the department is in support of district decisions that are in the best interest of kids. We have experts leading districts. We have board members that understand their role and understand what's best for kids, and we want to empower you to make good decisions with guidance that we're getting not only from our State Department of Education folks, but we've been in communication with various states around our area. We have had conversations with the Council of Chief State School Officers, a national organization. We've been in contact with the U.S. Department of Education. Worth sharing here that last week received a call from Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos asking what supports we needed. So there's been a lot of communication around any guidance that we give. I agree with the question or with the comment. I personally don't think it's a good thing to start giving letter grades out now. As a father of two students who are trying their very best, a laptop does not replace a teacher. We know that. So being fair with comments, I think giving comments is fantastic, but I also don't want to promote a plan where in some places you can get more than others. I think it's a good idea. I would encourage you to do that. But I do think some level of passing students along is going to be required, especially at the high school level. But I know the comment was for pre-K through 8. Some level of acceptance that they're going to be moving forward, I think is important also.
Okay, I have another question. This was asked a while back, but I didn't see it. Is there a group working on what we will need to do to reopen schools? Sorry, as soon as somebody writes something else, my whole screen goes down. IE supplies. Sorry about this. This is suppliers.
I saw the question, Bob. I could recast it if you like. So is there a group in charge of looking at what districts need to get back, whatever expenses are done or used, or what materials, what cleaning supplies, what is needed in order for schools to resume, and is that being communicated? So through the governor's municipal calls, there's communication that receipts should be kept, documentation should be kept as to expenditures around this. I'll tee it off for Kathy to jump in after I'm done talking if she wants to add more. But we are in the process now of starting to think about what does it look like when we start to partially open our buildings. 95% of my staff is working from home. We have to start thinking about what does it look like when it's safe to have some folks come in. And we also are having those conversations about what it might look like for our school buildings and municipal buildings. At this point, it's premature to even forecast because we are still in the middle of the wave. But we are thinking about that, and we appreciate you mentioning it and putting it on our radar as a concern that you have as well.
Good. Chris Clouet is now on again, Commissioner, if you want to call on him.
Okay, so Chris, I hope you can hear me. We talked a little bit about the grading recommendation, and the question was asked, you know, is it going to be a requirement? I shared that we're still honoring local control, but we recommend pass, fail, or pass incomplete. Could you share a little bit about how we got to that decision and any conversation about your engagement with colleges so that our listeners could be aware the impact or the mitigated impact for our learners when they go to college?
Thank you, Commissioner. Is my audio working? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. The Commissioner asked Keith Norton and I to work very closely with the Connecticut colleges, both all of the Connecticut colleges, including the independents, including the what I call the CSU system, but as well as UConn and community colleges, et cetera. And they are all willing to accept pass-fail grades for this final half of year or quarter, depending on how districts are calculating their grades and the access they have to updated grades from their teachers. The Commissioner asked us to put together a list of options, including, as you've seen in the guidance, pass-fail in the traditional sense, but also the option for a pass incomplete, especially pertaining to students in grades 9, 10, and 11 who could potentially come back and for a variety of reasons may want to complete their courses, but were not able to during this time of the pandemic for a variety of reasons. I won't list them for you. I know you're all very familiar with them, but we are cognizant of the fact, as the Commissioner said, that this is a local decision in terms of grading policies, but we definitely feel that this is an opportunity for districts to use this pass-fail in one of those versions, including a pass with distinction for those students who work exceptionally hard during this period. And the colleges have assured us this will not disadvantage the colleges. In addition, the Commissioner has been able to work with the NCAA, who has also worked with us to indicate that they will not disadvantage any student athletes regarding their future in college athletics and or related scholarships.
Anybody have a follow-up to that question for Chris? Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Commissioner, we've got, oh, there is one. Could you work with your counterparts in other states to understand if universities in other states will handle pass-fail the same way Connecticut is doing?
Thank you for the question. We are working with partners in other states. As you know, this is an evolving process. So some states are already moving in that direction very firmly. Others are still debating and working on it. But simple answer is yes, we will be doing that. As you know, we can't in any way influence the policies of universities in other states, but I think they are looking, and I'm certain of that they are looking at Connecticut as an example of a state that's moving forward on this.
If I can add, Connecticut is working to communicate not only with Connecticut colleges, but as Dr. Clouet mentioned, other states. We'll continue to do that. We're going to use or leverage our national group to make sure that colleges are hearing it throughout the country, that this has affected some areas maybe greater than other areas, and that our students need, we shouldn't be harming students in our policies if they couldn't control that. So we will continue to do that. We will continue to communicate with the United States Department of Education to ensure that they also support the decisions that we're making here. But we feel pretty confident that colleges throughout the country are going to move in this direction. I had a conversation with a representative from the NCAA with regard to student athletes, and knowing that pass fails for student athletes now, the pass is registered as a D. That's not acceptable for our learners. So they're working on that. It's going to take a little bit longer for them to communicate their plan, but they've assured us in Connecticut that their decisions are not going to negatively impact our learners. So I think that's an important message we want to get out there today.
Don Harris wanted to try again. Don? Can't hear you. Sorry, Don, can't hear you. Okay, I know there's another question. So one person asked, now we're getting a bunch of questions. One person asked, why would you just close till the end of May if we know most districts will close around the middle of June anyway?
So the decision on cancellations is the governor's decision based on input from the Department of Public Health and the Department of Education. We would like to, we want to plan for the worst but hope for the best. And, there's no perfect science to this. We don't want to shut down schools unless we absolutely have to. We are planning in the event that cancellations have to extend not only into June, but throughout summer for compensatory services or summer school. There's a possibility that those will also be impacted. And there's a possibility that schools will be impacted until late June. However, if the decision at 4 p.m. Is to push it back 1 month, it still gives us the opportunity to have some flexibility on what the further cancellations are. Furthermore, it gives us more time to engage with our learners to make sure that some of the planning that's happening in your districts, such as what does it look like to have a postponed graduation? Or, I know many students are asking questions about those type of things. It gives us a little bit more time to think about those things. The projections on number of cases and hospitalizations and recovery, they're changing regularly. So I think at this point, the decision is to give some consideration to making a final decision a little bit later based on what we do know now. And again, it comes from input from me, but also from our health department. And I know the governor takes these decisions very seriously.
Okay, I see we just got a bunch of comments, hard to read very quickly. Some concerned about, well, we have one from New Haven. She specifically put it, Dr. Tracy, would make sense to close everything now and stop stressing our students and families. It is the, stop writing so fast, I can't keep up. It is the humane thing to do. But I guess we'll know this afternoon from the governor exactly what's going to happen.
Thank you I just want to comment. I understand there's pretty strong emotions on both sides of this. And I respect the passion and the perspective on both sides of this. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Okay. Thank you. You want to talk a little about graduations? I don't see that in the chat, but I know people are wondering what is the commissioner going to give guidance on? And I know there was some yesterday on graduations. Would you like to mention that? Because it's so important to our kids, some of whom will not have a chance to walk across a stage beyond when they graduate high school. So
sure. Graduation, I had the privilege of speaking to high school students last week in a conference called Something Like This. And let me tell you, man, it really brought home a reminder of how much they want to be back with their school community, how much especially for seniors, this is impacting one of the most important times of their life. And they said very loudly, very, very articulately, very passionately that graduation matters so much. And there happened to be some staff members on the phone video conference who had children of their own. And they were almost tearing up, talking about what they would experience if they cannot attend a graduation for their senior. This is something that's critically important. The day after that call with students, I asked superintendents to start having conversations in their districts with high school seniors about what they want to see, what they want to experience. We need to make sure that we're doing everything in our power to get the voice of students in these decisions, because at the end of the day, it's their experience and their family's experience that we want to honor. Graduation is more than the diploma. It's really a source of healing for communities. So I can't stress enough the importance of having these conversations, regardless of what the announcement is today. Continue to plan for the worst, continue to plan for graduation for these students. Let them know that their 13 years of work will be honored in a special way and that their voice matters in planning that. So thank you for bringing that up.
I don't know if this is for the group or just for you, Commissioner, and SDE. Any programs or anyone working on keeping preschool kids busy? I don't know who that came from, but certainly I can only imagine being home with a couple of 2- and 3-year-olds this week in particular.
I'm glad to say that our partnership with Scholastic and the Nuyi family made a wonderful donation. Raj and Indra Nuyi made a personal donation and allowed us to purchase 187,000 packets of instructional materials, including books that kids could keep in their home. And we worked with Scholastic to make sure that we're including our pre-K, our early childhood folks there as well. So more information on the distribution of that will come soon. We do have them on our minds. We are working with OEC, Office of Early Childhood, to try to find ways, and we're going to continue to get better. But continue to tell us what you need, what resources you need, what support you need, and we'll do our very best through whether it's our online access through our website to provide you resources, videos, or links, or even good examples of what other districts are doing. We need to hear from you. Thank you.
And another question here: what guidance can you provide districts to position? Boy, as soon as I start reading, somebody asks another question. Can you provide districts to position themselves to receive aid from FEMA on the back end of this crisis? Likewise, what work can be done locally to prepare to access CARES Act funding?
I believe Kathy's still on the line. Kathy, could you take that question?
Certainly. All good questions. I would say at the moment, the one thing that every community should be doing is keeping track of what they are spending. We will be able to provide guidance about, how much funding will be available and that, and how it will be distributed in the next couple of weeks. But from reading the CARES Act and just from talking to some of my counterparts in other states, the better you do at documenting it, the more likely it is that there will be something that will be reimbursable. So that would be my guidance.
Anyone else want to speak to that? Yes.
Rebecca Reeder, may I just, since
course.
Don is finding a hard time unmuting himself, I just wanted to, and we're seeing a lot of comments in the chat box around the passion around different positioning on ending the school year. And I just wanted to give voice to some concerns I think that Don was hearing, that we were all hearing from that the other perspective from districts that are worried that they will lose the engagement of their students and their parents, and that will impact mostly the more struggling or the sort of people right on the edge of that performance curve. And so that is, as the commissioner said, it is understandable all the way around, especially for superintendents who are sort of on tenterhooks waiting as the days go out to want to plan. But that certainly is a concern for people as well, that we don't want to lose engagement, and with those parents as well. And also to a point that was made a couple of weeks or a week ago, maybe a year ago, that to have students, you know, up in arms over no graduation and the school year is suddenly over, and then going out and gathering in large numbers, because this is a different kind of situation for them in their reality than it is for us. So since Don wasn't able to unmute, I just wanted to put that perspective out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. You brought out some points that are on our mind. You know, while ultimately we're going to be forthcoming with what we think is what's safe for students and staff, and also the healthcare workers. You know, if we don't make a decision, we're impacting the lives of our healthcare workers who will have to deal with more cases. So it's something that we're taking very seriously. But you brought up a couple of points that I think are worth repeating. We are dealing in unprecedented time. We know our students are passionate, and we want to make sure that we're prepared to communicate with them regularly about what their thoughts are, so that whatever plan we have can help mitigate whatever emotional reaction they might have.
Commissioner, there are a lot of very positive comments on the in the chat room as well. But I think one of the things that I think the state will really have to deal with come normalcy, whatever that means, is the question of equity. I think, as Dr. Tracy said, this particular crisis really pointed up the inequities and how some districts are struggling so hard. And we appreciate the work of the Dalio Foundation and the people who have donated from Scholastic, but we really have to look at how are we treating our kids that are coming out of poverty, that don't have the resources, who may not have the parental support that they need. And I think we have to do a better job, and I'm sure you would agree. And once this is over, we should really take a look at that again. I know you are so involved with the Achievement Gap Task Force, but I think a lot of those issues must come back if we're going to have an equitable system.
So I'm going to ask Charlene to be prepared to comment, because I know she's done some amazing work in this area. But Bob, your point, you know, the inequities have really come to the surface, and they've been perpetuated by COVID-19, but they've been there long before. You know, yesterday's press conference, hearing the governor talk about how Black and Latinos are more likely to get it. The impact that that's going to have on Connecticut will last generations. You know, let's think about that. The impact that what we heard last night is going to have will last generations on our learners and in our school communities. So I agree with you. I think the people that are on this phone call now get it, and we're all one community looking at addressing inequities. Together, we know equity and access matter, but I hope that this can really galvanize our doubling down of urgency and pushing together in one united voice to make sure that we're addressing inequities for our learners, so that we can be the best state of Connecticut that we can be. With that, I'll turn it over to Charlene, who has probably more specifics on what we're doing in that area.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I alluded to that earlier, that the issue of equity is one that it's not about putting it down and picking it up after this is over. It really is something that we have to continue to embed in the work that we're currently doing, which is one of the reasons we're working on a webinar about being explicit about equity. How do you think about equity in the educational opportunities, the continued educational opportunities, because of all the parent organizations that I communicate with? You hear the stories of the struggles, and the commissioner said it earlier, having a device doesn't exactly end all the issues there. What about connectivity, right? And some of those kinds of things that's there as well. So the commissioner is right, and you're right to bring this forward. I am hopeful that this gives us a great opportunity. While we see it now through the education piece, it becomes a community issue that we really have to stop and think about. How do we as whole communities, including our schools and the education sector, work in a cross-sector way to address the issue going forward. So we will continue to do the work that we are indeed doing and engage you in those conversations. But we're working on some specific webinars right now to help folks to think about the equity issues embedded, using the equity lens with everything that we're actually doing right now, including closure decisions, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we really want to be a part of that.
Nick Caruso here. I just want to mention that the Connecticut Commission for Educational Technology has a there's two committees, Digital Learning Advisory Council, which I'm chair of, and we're going to be looking at this as we go forward on the pedagogy area, but also there's a separate advisory council on infrastructure, and they've been spending a lot of time working on equity even before this started. And Jeet's been very ably representing the commissioner and the department on that, the Connecticut Education Commission. But I would encourage you to continue the dialogue with them. They've done a lot of work on it. They've developed an equity toolkit and are trying to look at this, have been trying to look at this. So I think there's some resources there you may be able to take advantage of as time goes on.
Thank you. So Bob, if it's okay, can I make a couple comments based on some of the other questions that I saw scroll up in the chat board?
Absolutely.
And keeping in mind that it's close to 1 o'clock now. First of all, Nick Caruso, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, they are great partners, and I appreciate you mentioning that. And by far, you have the nicest background of the entire chat. I wanted to share that, with regard to guidance on early childhood, with regard to guidance on special education, with regard to how do I talk to my learners about, what's going on socially and emotionally, the State Department of Education developed a professional support series for families and a professional support series for districts, meaning there are videos and webinars that have already been posted online so that you could use these videos, share these videos in your district, share them with your whole community. It's our way of providing some resources around early childhood. So we have someone from the State Department of Education, someone from the Office of Early Childhood, Ruth Levy and Andrea Burnell, talking about how to support your youngest learners. That's already available to you now. And we're going to continue doing these based on what we hear from you need. There's best practices happening in districts. We know that the answers to how to address some of these problems that we have lie in your districts. So we've tried to create a portal where we're hearing from you on best practices. Deputy Commissioner Desi Nesmith is overseeing that. He can't be on this call today because he's on a call with Lego because we're looking to secure a donation. So he's available to help orchestrate the receiving of best practices that you have on topics that we've been discussing today. And we could put it up online and make it available to everyone. Together, again, the whole sense of community, together we're going to get through this better than we would if we're working separately. And then the final message, as Charlene said at the beginning, it's critically important that as leaders in your districts, you take care of yourself, you take care of the people around you, and know that we're all human. We're all trying to handle this for ourselves as well as we lead. Make sure you're taking care of yourselves, and know that we're going to do our very best to support you, to listen to you, and we count on that partnership because we know that together that provides the best options for our students. Bob, I want to thank you for having me on this call. I also want to thank Fran for orchestrating that as many superintendents could join as possible, because my afternoon is going to change a little bit now. But I want to thank you both groups for the partnerships and for the work that you're doing on behalf of all of our kids in Connecticut. So thank you, and thank you to the team that's on the call. I wish you all the best. Take care.
Thank you, Miguel. And before we go, I just want to wish everybody a happy Passover, a happy Easter. It's a very different one. Our Seder last night sort of looked like what we have right in front of you now. It was very different, but contact the people you love, let them know you love them. We will get through this, and hopefully next year we'll be in a much, much better place. So thank you all. I again apologize that some people couldn't get in, but we'll find a way to make it up to them. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.